I'm going to try to stick to your principles. And let's say we have 15 minutes, right? And we want 5 and 5 and 5 of each of those things. I would say because handstands are on this like really fragile joint in our body, it's really important that we really start with just getting our wrists ready for what's coming.
Okay.
So I would say, and I don't know if you want to like take notes or anything for this part, but I would say make some solid wrist exercises. Go circles around the wrists, straight elbows, and then make sure you go both directions. And then the next thing I would start doing is knuckle push-ups. So this would be like forearm strength and your wrist strength as well. So for the knuckle push-up, you want to take your shoulder right over your knuckles here. And this is like a really quick little point here. Your medial epicondyle, if your elbow, which is just the pointy part, should be right over the wrist for this entire exercise. And if you're trying for a straight handstand, that's where you want this bony part to stay. All right, so during that part, we're just going to go up and down on to the fingers through the knuckles of the hand. So it's just this part that lifts, okay? And then as you get stronger at that, you start to move your knees further and further and further away without letting your shoulders go backwards. And eventually you've got full knuckle push-ups. So that's just strengthening all of this, getting it ready for what's coming. Next, we're going to just get into some plank work. You know, you're warming up the core. You can do your mountain climbers. I like to do some down dog protraction and retraction, which is just going to be pushing through your shoulder here, keeping the elbow straight. Yeah. And then go ahead and add the full push up to that. I would make it like 20 protraction, retraction, 20 push-ups in that upside down position. And then you're going to want to do a little bit of hollow body work. So hollow body is just pushing your rib cage in, trying to keep your back flat to the floor, and then lower your legs as far as you can without your back popping up off of the floor, right? So we're going to lower, lower, lower as far as you can, and then take your arms overhead. Aim for about a 30-second hold on that.
Okay.
Next, let's get into the legs. So we would just do some leg lifts here. Other side, I would do about 10 per side. And then last, we would just warm up the back side. So we just lift the chest. You can make this full body, chest and legs as well. Throw in some push-ups. And I'd say you're just about ready for the next little bit of handstands. Okay, so for the next round, I would start working towards the tuck handstand. So what you would do is place hands right next to the knees. Again, keep your shoulder right over the wrist and just lengthen, bring the knees to the ground. I would do that about 20 times. And then the next thing you would want to try is just little butt kicks.
The butt kicks.
Yep. And the idea during that is not to let your body rock backwards and forwards. It's trying to keep the shoulders exactly in place for those butt kicks.
Okay.
Yep. And then I would start using a wall next. You can see behind me here, I've got a cork yoga mat like taped up to the wall.
Okay.
And you would start just kicking up to the wall. Let your back leg hit the wall. Leave your front leg heavy. And see if you can just aim for a little bit of balance. Notice that I'm pushing not through my back leg off of the wall, but I'm trying to push through my hands in the same way that I pushed my knuckle up. I'm going to push through my hand to try to get my body to move backwards.
Okay. So up against the wall, you got your scissor legs. So one leg against the wall, the other one kind of for balance, and then you're using your wrists to kind of pull yourself off the wall. You're not pushing off the wall with your leg. You're using
That's
your
right.
wrists to pull yourself off the wall.
That's right. Yep. Yep. And one important part of handstands is like your shoulder flexibility. A lot of people think that if you're making this shape in a handstand, that you're doing it wrong.
Okay.
Like if you're like that, then you're doing it wrong. That really just means that your ribs are not closed, and not
Okay.
everybody is able to close their ribs and open their shoulders at the same time.
Okay.
So you want to think of your rib cage as like a big egg, right?
Okay.
So we've got to take that egg and find the middle of it and place it underneath our shoulders and wrists.
So
make
when
sense?
we're doing that, like we're up here, should we try to look back, or can we just look at the floor? When
Great
I look
question.
back, it's disorienting.
Yeah, great question. I always like to tell people to look directly in between their knuckles. So if there's a line right here in between my knuckles, I want to look right about there. And then the next bit of that's really common is you don't want to look through your whole head and neck. You want to actually look through your eyebrows. So I'm going to try to keep my head as neutral as possible in between my arms. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do that, but I'm still looking in between my hands.
Okay. Head kind of relaxed, neutral, looking in between your hands. Okay. Okay. Of all of is that the end of the progression?
I would then move towards, I think by then, you're going to try to find again this little like miniature moments of balance where you can feel what's going on underneath your hand. Like the handstand is really born from the ground up, right? So if you're not really sure what's going on in your hand, then the rest of it that won't make sense to you. We're going to try to find this like sensitivity of where the weight is in your hand. It should be pretty much even, not all the way in the back, not all the way in the front. Somewhere right in the middle is great, is where you want to imagine where that weight lands. So we're going to try to find moments where you can feel yourself balancing off the wall. And I like to say, like, the foot that's against the wall is a little bit like hot potato style. Like you can bring it back to the wall and then see if you can barely get it off of the wall. If you need to bring it back, do that. But you're going to find most success in these little brief moments where you're like, oh shit, I'm balancing.
So is your hand against the floor? Is it flat against the floor like this, or is it a little bit off?
Flat. In fact,
Flat.
A good thing to think of is if somebody were to try to pry my fingers off of the floor right now, it should be very, very difficult to do so. My knuckles are connected to the floor, but I'm gripping the floor with my fingers the same way that my foot would grip the floor with my foot knuckles there.
Okay.
That's the same thing.
Would you say that the wrist is kind of the fulcrum of where you find your stability and where you do the actual balance training is a lot of really activating in your wrists?
The wrist is optimally, the wrist is, and the hand pushing is where all of the balance happens. And the rest of you is not like trying to compensate. If you're doing the balancing up here, then you're turning yourself into a noodle that's going to be very difficult for the rest of you to understand where it is in space.
Okay. Got it. I see.
And then, so once you've gotten a few rounds of this practice in with just trying to feel your balance, let go of all of that. Turn your body the other direction so you're facing the wall. And then walk your hands as close to the wall as you can. Squeeze everything together. Don't try to balance this. Just push through your shoulders as far as you can. Straighten your elbows and lengthen your body as far as you can up towards the sky. And then hold for a minute. If you can hold this for a minute on your first try, you're doing above average.
Hold for a minute. Okay.
If you don't have a full minute on your first try, come down when you need to, pause your timer, resume that minute the next time, as soon as you can get back up. And this is the strength and endurance bit.
Okay. So that might be a good finisher for the end of the progression.
I would finish that with that, yes.
How long would you spend doing that kind of wrist balancing, scissoring against the wall?
Yeah. I would give that a solid 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, out of your 15. So the first bit would be like your warm up. That would be like your balance practice time. And then the last 5 minutes would be knocking out these endurance holds.
Okay.
I would try for 2 minutes total among your 5 minutes. If you can knock out 3 out of those 5 minutes holding up against the wall, then you're doing really good.
Okay. So fall down, you do a minute, you're exhausted, rest for 30 seconds to a minute, and get back on the horse.
That's right.
Okay. Got it. Nick, welcome. What's up, Thomas? Guys, we have a handstand trainer for our training today. And we're spelling out a handstand beast mode protocol that Joseph is walking us through. And so we've kind of, if you didn't watch it, I'll get you the recording too. And I know Ramey's taking some notes. What would you say would be a key progress metric for, let's say, of all the things that you showed today, and you could say, hey, of one of these, which one should I, for example, how much time I spent in the scissor area, or how much time I spend every day in that last position? Which one of those, theoretically, if I only ended up doing one of them, which one could actually get me there?
Yeah. I would say the most important out of all of that is the hold. See, if you're able to hold that against the wall for 1 minute, then your body is going to just start understanding where it is in space a little bit more. Just the more time that you spend upside down on your hands, the more data your body is collecting about being upside down and holding that shape. So then that will begin to translate into being able to, do you ever do something it's when you first start doing it, it feels like a blur and you're like, what the hell just even happened? But then the more times you do it, the more slow motion that sort of feels, and the more you understand about what you're doing. It's the same here. When you first start trying this, you're like, what the hell? There's no freaking way. But if you really dedicate yourself to spending time on hands, that's when you'll start noticing you're getting stronger, you're able to hold longer, and you'll start feeling what your body is doing in space.
Okay. Now, once I've gotten pretty good at those, and it's like, now I'm ready to go without the wall, would you recommend that at some point? And if so, would you recommend the wall stay there, or would you recommend just falling on your butt?
Okay, there's two things. Remember earlier I said I just fell on my ass a bunch of times doing this?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. In fact, I think it's good to try doing things with something safe behind you to fall flat onto. Because then you do start noticing, oh, this is the point of no return.
Okay.
And you can use the wall to learn how to twist out. So what you just saw me do was the beginner's version of a twist out. I can show it again real fast here. If you're facing the wall, you don't even have to have your hands that close to the wall. You can just take one leg out to the side, and you can use your gaze, your eyes, to look at where you want that foot to land and send it there.
Okay. Ramey, you had a question. Why don't you ask your question, Ramey? And by the way, anybody, if you guys are having questions about either post them in here or raise a hand, and I'll get to you. Go ahead, Ramey.
So my question would be to just repeat every 72 hours.
To do this every 72 hours?
Yeah, my question, how often would you do it? Would you do it like twice a day? Would you do it like...
I wouldn't do it twice a day. I think once a day would be fine. Once every other day, I think you would start to feel the effects and start getting much, much better pretty quickly. Yeah, I suppose it depends on your goals. Is it just to, to be a little bit better at handstands, or is it to like freaking get it? Because if you're like, I want this, then if you do it every day, you'll have it pretty quickly.
And
Okay, cool.
Randy, the 72 hours that we use in between our beast mode protocols is because there's a high tension element, and the high tension element requires a physical recovery. Whereas here, if we're hitting a repetition threshold, whether we're gathering kind of balanced data every time, as long as we're not, you know, breaking down our muscle to the point of needing to recover, the recovery period isn't as important. And so I guess a good question to follow up on that one, that was a really good question, Remy. When would you say you're doing, like, because right now it sounds like, hey, the more time I can spend in that position, the more data I'm going to gather from my brain, and the faster I'm going to get there. But is there a point of it's like, okay, you're overdoing it, you need to take a break? When would that point be, if that point exists?
100% does. Like I mentioned in the beginning, there's a lot of fragile bones here, right? We have like cuboidal bones all through these wrists, and they can get messed up. So if you start noticing wrist pain, I would say that's your body telling you maybe take a few days off. Okay. Another thing that can happen is like elbow tendonitis. Through this extension, we get sometimes a little bit of like the muscle that wraps around from our bicep over here. It'll get inflamed. So you really need to like monitor that. When you're first starting, give yourself grace. Give yourself grace. Like once you start feeling these things, it can be a little signal for you to take a couple days off.
Okay. Good. Thank you. I like that. I know there was another question. I think it was Richard. Did you have a question?
Yeah, yes, I did. And I wanted to say thank you and it's an honor to be a part of this meeting. My question was, you mentioned like it's a lot of wrist work. Like, so would you compensate in isolation and forearm workouts or tricep? Because, they do help stabilize. So I was wondering if you're probably weak in that area, would you do like a forearm handstand to try to build your forearm muscles? And,
I don't think that I would do a forearm handstand just for the forearm muscles, but I do agree with you that it is nice to find other ways to strengthen. Like if you just have like a set of dumbbells, you can just do wrist curls with your dumbbells. That's really solid for this. Another thing that we work on that's like kind of neglected in most exercises is this backside. So if you're thinking like how you would rev a motorcycle, the same thing, but with a dumbbell is really nice for the back of your forearm. And then shoulders are extremely important. I would work on shoulder opening activities. So that would be this direction, like armpit out. Yeah. If you've got really, really tight shoulders, and a lot of us who do weightlifting do, a really great shoulder exercise or opener would be to use any elevated platform, straighten those elbows, and then send your chest through and arch and round the back. So it's like the cat-cow in yoga, but I'm trying to lengthen. Again, I'm like flexing my triceps here, trying to lengthen my arms. And then I'm going to round and arch, because that's what's going to get you that open handstand line. A lot of people can't open here without the ribs compensating. So you want to be able to have the ribs stay in and open up.